Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday Conversation with Friends. And today I have my good friend Travis Lohmann with us. Travis, how are you? So good to have you. Would you please tell us a little bit about who you are for those of you who don't know you already?
Hi, Shirley. So thank you so much for having me. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Travis Lohmann. I am a Las Vegas, Nevada native. So I've been born and raised here my entire life. I'm a composer, I guess you could say, for film and media. I've done some things for short films, feature films, TV commercials and such. But also I've kind of tapped into the educational realm of just like solo piano repertoire and a couple string educational pieces here and there. So I've done that. My primary training is in classical piano and jazz piano. So I did the jazz training in college where I got to study just a lot of just really unique repertoire and then specifically jazz composition for my degree.
That's incredible because I know I've had an opportunity to look through some of your music. I worked on one or two piano solos and I just think they're amazing. They're wonderful. And they go through a very wide spectrum of sounds and styles. You're not stuck in one sound for sure. But everything is very intuitive, but also very structured and well thought out. And could you talk a little bit about that? I know the piece I worked on was Picking Roses, and from your newest piano solo collection.
From the piano solo collection, right?
Right. And I love it. And so we'd love to get to know your process and what inspires you to write, and anything you want to share with us.
Sure thing. So this specific book here, so Sonic Bouquet, it's a collection of 8 contemporary, I guess we call them showcase solos. And this is near and dear to my heart because it's something that I spent the past 3 years working on from like summer of 2016 to like winter of 2019. I mean, there's only 8 pieces in the book, but I mean, it's taken so long to really, from the start of it, I never really thought it was gonna be, 3 years in the making. I figured maybe we could cut it in half a year and I could just do a piece every other week and get it done. And this rabbit hole turned into something way much deeper than I thought it was going to go. But a lot of the way that I structure my pieces, expands from my training in college too, of just learning how to structure form of your music and having a clear goal of where you want to go in terms of harmony, melody. A lot of times when I sketch things out, I'll just have like little blurbs of just melody fragments. It's not even really notated properly, but it's enough for me to know what I want to do. And I'll have to just I'll flesh it out later. Other times, if I'm thinking of a harmonic sense, like maybe I'll hear a chord progression that I really think would work, or I'll just spend my time, coming up with chord progressions at the piano. And if I don't have enough time to write it all out, I'll just write the chord symbols out as such. So at least I have an idea of where I want to go. So that type of structure. Really important for me. Before I started studying composition, I was writing before that as well as a, junior and senior in college. But what I noticed was things were very unstructured and you can see a clear difference where it's just like, there's all these ideas and they're not linked together by anything. It just sounds like cut, 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 cut. And it's like, it's not really, it doesn't say anything. There's nothing that you can relate to.
That's something I've noticed when I was working on your piece is it feels very meaningful. And so when I'm working on the piece, I feel like granted, I had the privilege, if I wanted to, I could have a dialogue directly with you. But when I'm practicing, I really felt I was having a fully engaged dialogue with a composer. And because they were clear messages. And it wasn't just... I equate it to a well-written novel where obviously the novelist throughout time has sort of kind of had those imagined those characters and maybe small pieces, but then there's a way of putting it back together and there's this clear sense of storytelling. And I know those pieces from that particular collection, the Sonic Bouquet, are vignettes of specific pieces. And could you share a little bit about the concept of storytelling in your music? Because I know you're also interested in, and you have done some film scoring and video gaming type of music. That's definitely multimedia, multi-sensory, and just storytelling.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the fact that you brought up story time, because we hear that a lot in terms of film music as well. It's like you want to be able to tell a story, and you want that music still to kind of support what's going on,
Right.
but not be obtrusive. You know, the worst thing is where it is obtrusive and then it takes away from that, you know. But for me, I know each one of these pieces, it's like, I didn't even plan on it being a thing about flowers. That came later on. I just wrote a
Really?
piece and then I sent it off to Piano Pronto. And I was like, you know, I mean, I called the original one Picking Lilacs, and I was like, okay, done. That's it. It's one piece. Let's move on. And it was at the request of Piano Pronto, and they were like, can you just do a collection? I was like, of what? And they're like, of pieces, you know, that are kind of depictions of flowers. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
It's a weird thing to try to tackle, because it's like, you know, how do you take something that's like, you know, a visual representation of a flower like this and make a musical, you know, story?
It's very interesting because I have the book here, right? Right. I'm sitting at my piano, and this is the book, and it was very interesting. Of course, I have the privilege of chatting with you throughout, you know, we went through some of the pieces where we chatted, and it was very interesting. I know you're a little far from your piano, but can we hear a little bit of something?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's really cool, and there's like certain spots here, even like the beginning opening of Picking Lilacs, it was like, I was just sitting there one day and I'm just like, speaking the words "picking lilacs in the spring."
Oh, I can hear that. Right, picking lilac in the spring.
And I was like, picking lilacs in the spring. And that's what kicked the whole thing off, you know? But what's really cool is like there's certain parts harmonically wise that I just like, that I kind of gravitate towards. Things like this type of motion here, where you get like this that type of sound, you know. It's just like those types of resolutions are things that I just really it opens my ears up, and I'm like, oh wait, that's really cool, you know.
Yes, and that is really cool. Do you write vocal music?
I've done a couple things. It's I haven't done enough. That's definitely a market or a subsector that I want to tackle. And then strings too as well, because like those, you know, strings and voice in a way, kind of like.
Well, yeah, but the way you responded to that one phrase that goes with the words, because, you know, being a vocalist,
Yes.
and because most people forget the voice is my primary instrument.
Right.
You know, because I spend 90% of my time playing the piano, and I've been playing since I was 4, right? And
We're the same. We started at the same age. That's so cool. Yeah.
is that because we have Asian mothers? As I remember my mom texting me, say, well, your nephew just turned 3. Can he take piano lessons? I was like,
Yes.
a little young, you know, maybe start with a violin, you know, because they have smaller violins. And I said, but why do you ask? I asked my mom. And my mom said, well, he's 3. He should be making himself useful.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see like that type of mindset, you know, of like really just pushing it at that young of an age too. Yeah.
I just loved playing when I was 4, you know.
Right. I mean, and I think that it definitely helps if the student or the child has a natural interest to begin with. Otherwise, it's not going to be fun, you know, especially starting that young.
Yeah.
You know? It's not going to be fun at all for the kid, you know.
Well, I don't know. I couldn't relate to anything not fun. You know, it's fun for me, and the kids will come to me, have a good time mostly because I'm like a cartoon character. You know?
Right.
And they say, "Oh, I'm studying with a cartoon character. This is fun," you know. And but what you said about like a picking. No, it's just you hear the text, and I think that would be really interesting because, you know, being a singer, studying vocal music, and I'm always looking for that relationship between the words and the music, and of course we have composers like Brahms, who's kind of like forced the words onto his melody. But and also it's interesting because when you do music in different languages, it's so important to get a flavor of the language. Not just of course I do the word by word translation. Doesn't matter what language it's in, but to spend time with the language itself. That there's an ebb and flow, and so it'd be interesting to hear what you would do with a voice.
Yes, and on that note, I remember in one of my theory classes we were talking about diction and phrasing specifically, and when it comes to foreign languages as well, because certain phrases don't naturally fit as well, amongst different foreign languages, where you'd have to maybe flip a melody or to accommodate, or rhythmically like change it to make it work syllabically.
Right.
So that was something really interesting for me. I was like, wait, I never even thought about that. Like breaking
I
down
know.
syllables and stretching it. I was like, that's cool. It doesn't,
Yes.
it doesn't work universally.
No,
among
especially in
languages
opera, you
as well.
repeat forever. You repeat the
Right.
same phrase over and over. And like there's a lot of Shakespeare literature I'm doing it in French. I'm doing it in Italian. That's not even the original language. Reading the letter scene from Macbeth as Lady Macbeth. You're doing this whole thing in Italian. How do you make it work? And then you break into this crazy
Yes.
thing, right?
Right.
But I want to get back to your music.
Yeah.
And,
So if you don't mind, I'd like
yes.
to maybe present, because we were talking about the one that you were working on was Roses.
yeah.
Roses is a special one for me because Roses was the last one that was written. And
Yes.
that was the final one. So like I've got some passages here, just specific sounds that I like. Like you'll notice in this measure here,
Yes.
like
Yes.
you got like these, it literally looks like a cluster of notes,
Right.
and it's like, oh, how could that, but for me, that type of sound, is just really nice. And then where it resolves,
Right.
is kind of cool there.
Right.
That sort of thing is like, I really like sounds like that. That probably comes from my jazz training. Because
And it sounds very orchestral to me. Like there's a lot of color changes. Like
Yes.
it doesn't feel like it's one instrument. So you're just
right.
yeah,
Right.
it doesn't feel like it's one color, and it doesn't feel like it's one instrument. And that was what's fun for me. And of course, the next section, the part where you're bypassing through right now a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's where I hear a lot of Debussy. Yeah, the Debussy.
Yep.
I was like, dude, that does not play like you want me to play this on the piano. I'm going through it. It's like, okay, the fingers, you have to pretend you're something other than a piano because it
Right.
does not, it's the color blending is very impressionistic to my ear. And I remember calling my friend in Hawaii saying, this section reminds me of Debussy. It's because he and I just had a conversation about Debussy is very confusing for him. Because being a vocalist, Debussy's melody is so part of the rest of it. So when you work on the melody alone, it does not make sense.
But when you put all the parts together, that's when things really, and it's interesting that you mentioned Brahms, because one of my primary high school piano teacher talked a lot about, you should listen to Brahms's piano music because it's very orchestral in nature.
Yes.
Right. I was like, what are you talking about? At the time, I didn't know what he meant. And I was like, oh, it is. And so looking at this part here, this type of sound too, is just like, that's the film scoring influence coming right here.
Yeah.
That sort of like augmented sound there is something that I really like doing there. And then you get like these really nice inversion movements.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. Let me see if there's another place, because I love harmony. Harmony is like a big part of.
I'm like staring at the screen myself because I'm so fascinated by it, and it was fun for me to work on it because there was so much discovery. It felt like it was a treasure map that you follow and you see what you can find.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, my original goal for these pieces was for them to be more than just run-of-the-mill piano pieces. I wanted
They're not. Right.
Well, and I mean, what I mean is like, I wanted it to be something where it's like, it was relatable to the player, but also I wanted it to throw in some curveball surprises, things that you wouldn't expect. Whether that means a chord progression doesn't go where you want it to or you think it's going to, or maybe just something that's a little more technically challenging and fun, just as a curveball to make it more interesting for the player. So like if you're looking at like this part here, this was from, which one is this? This is Violets, and Violets is a minimalistic work in the style of, you could say, someone like Philip Glass, if you're looking or composers like Johan Johannesson, who is a film composer. He was a film composer from Finland.
Wow.
So, but this type of sound, this middle section here, I got to give a shout out to one of my piano teacher pals, Sue Calloway. She actually was like,
yeah?
I think you've got like all this minimalistic stuff that's going on here. Why don't you try something a little different where it like breaks it up? And so this part here is really cool. You get this, it's like this extended harmony type of thing where you get like, but that type of sound is a very contemporary jazz type sound.
Yes.
But the way that it's voiced, and that's one thing that comes directly from the jazz training too, is we looked a lot at voicing your chords. How are you voicing your chords? So for example, for me, like some of my favorite voicings of chords come from where you put your dissonances at. And dissonances are really important to me because it's like you have, oh man, this is going to go in this, it's like this huge discussion of like, for me, like sound is like, you've got like the brighter side of things where it's like the bright side where you go around the circle fifths and it goes brighter, but you go the darker side of things where it goes the other way around. But also too, so like for me, keys get brighter or warmer.
Yes.
You know, so like C major and G and D are increasingly brighter, but something like D flat major is warm. It's not
I
dark,
agree.
it's
you
warm.
Know, I get that. And, you know, it's interesting because being a vocalist, often the singers will choose a key that is appropriate for the voice.
Correct.
I don't practice that. I don't practice that because I hear the keys in different colors.
Yes.
And it bothers me when it's transposed to a different key. To me, it's a different piece.
It is. Yeah. No, totally. You know what I mean? Like there's a really distinct difference between something like this.
Yes, right? You hear that. And now, you know, I want to touch upon something where I thought it was really remarkable because I played a little tidbits of your pieces and I threw it on Facebook, I threw it on Instagram, and the people loved it. You know, it's like minutes after I posted, there are people who reposted it to Japan, people who reposted it to South America, people who reposted it to Europe, people reposted it to Taiwan, and I thought that was so cool. People liked your sound, and they're not necessarily musicians; they're music lovers. So can we do this? Can we do this for a moment? Can we share a little bit of your music? And because I know you have a YouTube for picking roses, do you think you can share that screen and make sure you share the sound so people can hear a little bit of your music? And so for those listeners who are not professional musicians, they can relate to some of the things you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Let me see if this can work here. Okay, so I can just share.
Now, if not, I have the link here too. Oh, awesome. Yes. Would you please make sure you share the sound as well?
Yeah. Is that an option I need to turn on or should I do it
automatically? No, you need to do that in Zoom.
Okay, I need to do that in Zoom.
Otherwise, I can share from my end.
Hold on. Let me see. Do I share? Oh, share computer sound.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Let's see it. I hope this works. Here we go.
And then we can maybe maximize the screen.
Yeah.
And this is Mr. Lohmann in his natural habitat. Well, thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you
And
for having
and
me.
I mean, it's wonderful, and I can hear like the little parts we talked about where
Yeah.
I can hear the. I know you described that section as a woodwind flourishes. I can hear the clarinet and the oboes, and because of the tessitura, the range. I need to
Right.
use terminology that everybody can understand. The range of of the notes you
Yep.
hear a lower woodwind and not necessarily like the flutes until maybe a little later, and it's so colorful. And then of course the parts I hear different influences that's more Germanic and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like yeah, the thing I was talking about earlier too, with just like voicings too. I mean, a lot of that is just
Mhm.
super important to me. It's like a lot of the times, I mean, I'll just sit there at the piano and just start organizing tones in a certain way until I find like a certain um, chord or a certain way of voicing that chord, that works. And going back to dissonances too. I mean, like, so for a lot of the times for me, if I'm coming up with like that sort of sound, to me is just like, that's a sound that I just immediately identify with, because it's like, it's looking at where do I put the notes in a certain order, and it just works so well, for that type of
Right.
sound that I'm going for.
And now I'm very curious because you know you wrote this piece of music. You had a very specific sounding mind, and you're a pianist. And I have to say, I play it very differently than you do, and you've heard parts of it. And what
And
is
you
it?
are doing so well on it. It's so cool to hear someone else play it. I was like, this is great. This is
And
really cool.
I was just gonna ask you what it's like because it's like I'm saying your words, but I'm not saying the way you would say it.
It's rewarding to hear someone else do it, because I mean, it's like, it's a different interpretation than what I would
Yes.
see it as, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like, there's certain liberties that are taken, but it tells a really good story still, with the way that's being presented, and it gives me a different outlook of it, as in, oh, I want to try maybe phrasing it like that a little bit. That's cool. I like that.
Because I think my singing has a strong influence in how I play. I
Yes.
think I play very melodically and a little bit more lyrically, and I hear the colors a little differently. But I was like, well, I wonder because usually the dude who wrote the music is dead. Whatever I do, there's nothing he can do about it. He won't even be able to
Yeah.
tell me. I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't post this. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Like
Yeah.
I got a live one here.
No, I mean, I am extremely flattered and extremely happy that, other people get a chance to like play it, because, I don't really get to see that much. It's like, you write the piece and it's done and you put it away and you don't really come back to it. And it's like when people post or, showcase themselves doing it, I was like, wow, this is really cool. It's really cool to see somebody else do this and maybe have different musical ideas than I didn't think of it. I was like, oh, they're bringing out that line. That's cool. Or
So was that strange to you in some ways? Because it's like you wrote those. It's like a playwright, right? You wrote this play, and the actors go on stage, and they decide to do something that's like,
off
what?
the beaten path. It's good. It's good. I don't think it was strange as it was enlightening to see something. You know,
What would you say?
it's enlightening to see another person's interpretation of it.
I think I just wanted to hear that one more time. I'm just kidding. I didn't hear it. I
Yeah.
didn't hear
And
it.
and it's weird, like when we talk about especially like in the jazz world too. My jazz professor a lot of the times would be like, well, you have to remember that jazz is an oral art form. I mean, we learn it
Right.
pretty much by ear. The only reason the written form exists is so that way we have like something that solidifies it down on paper. It doesn't mean that it's being played exactly as
Right.
it's written on paper. And it's strange coming from like the classical realm and the
Yes.
jazz realm. It's like
Right.
the paper is no, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of things that are not in the score that
You have
are
to imagine
implied,
it.
I suppose.
Right.
It's implied. It's not like I'm going to write every single specific direction of how to phrase it, because
Right.
that's
You should.
up
You're
to you too.
And I think there's a certain expectation that the player is familiar enough with the style to know, and I think there's a. It's like the way Bach wrote his music. We have to guesstimate what he really wanted. it.
Right. Yeah. And, and to think about someone like that, being a church musician and having to write that much music, a lot of his
Oh,
pieces
wow.
are born from like
Necessity.
necessity and
It's in
improvising.
your contract. You have to write this many pieces throughout the year,
And,
right?
and I have to give another shout out to Jennifer Eklund, who is the editor
Ah,
and
yes,
owner of Piano
yes,
Pronto as
yes.
well, because I mean, when I first came to her, previously before that, I had already tried out a couple of different publishing houses, and the audition for those publishing houses was going to be like, I want you to write, level 1, level 2 music.
Right.
That was the audition to get into the publishing house, and I was like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. And at that, I mean, I don't even know if that's something I'd want to do for the rest of my life, because it's not me. So I went to, I found Jennifer and I emailed straight up. I was like, hey, here's some pieces that I wrote from 2010. Are you guys taking anyone? Sometimes it's nice to just reach out and ask.
I think
The
you
least they can
should.
say is no.
Right. I mean, you haven't got anything, so what do you have to
Right.
lose, right?
So, I was very fortunate that Jennifer said, sure, we'll take you on. And her as an editor role, in the sense of just tidying up and making parts presentable, I like that, because that allows me to really just write, with pretty much zero restrictions.
That's so awesome, because I know I've used Piano Pronto's publications,
Yeah.
parts of it for my students.
Yes.
And I've used Jennifer Eklund's music that my students they really gravitate towards.
Yes, they
some of
do.
that sound, because they're fun. It's like I got 7-year-old kid who says, "That's my favorite composer. I want to play another one of her pieces." I was like, "You're
And
7. You don't know
alive,
anything
too,
yet."
and she's
But,
a living composer. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I know some of my students would be excited to work on some of your pieces, more advanced students, because
Yeah.
those pieces require a certain sophistication to play it well. But they would be excited because they're Asian Americans, and I have kids who come to me specifically asking, "Could I play something that's written by Asian American composer?"
Aww.
And, yeah, and then they would tie it into, they would write, sometimes they would even tie it into like an essay competition. They will enclose
Sure.
some things they do, and for that. So let's see. Let me see if I
Yeah.
can.
So since you're talking about Asian American composers, and specifically for me, Orchids is that type of sound. Specifically, I wanted to throw in this. Yes, this type of thing here. That sort of sound there is like one that I was really going to go for. I was like, I want at least one measure where I can throw in that sound. If I throw in that sound in one measure, I'm good. I will think this piece is a success, So that was Orchids there. And, some of my other musical influences, as we talked before, it's, I like a lot of like progressive jazz, progressive rock music. And those guys are like, they do things like alternating time signatures,
Right.
or signatures. So like, even right there, you've got
7/8.
yeah, I was just like, ooh, I want to toss that in there. But then sometimes I'll try to do like little fun games with myself, where it's like this line here, where you have like these accents.
Yeah.
And just
Right.
I was like, I wonder if I could do like a little accent pattern there and kind of make it a fun game.
That is so neat. I really love stuff like that. And no, I could sit here and talk with you forever. Just your music is so fascinating. I love it. And but we do have to wrap it up, and maybe we can have more conversations in the future. But now, what would you share with the listeners and with the audience members who hear your music? If there's one thing you can share with them, what would that be?
If there was one thing that I could share with the listeners about this collection, is that you're basically getting a chance to have an inside look at my favorite types of sounds and styles of music, and all of that is just kind of rolled up in one into this book. You get this wide selection of just like film music, jazz,
Yes.
contemporary styles, little bits and pieces where you get to cross your hands over. I was like, oh man, I wish I could play the guitar, but I can't. So I want to try to do something that is like that, So I try to pull from all my favorite influences, and what you're getting is really just this in-depth look at, you know, things that I enjoy, and hopefully that comes out in this.
I think so definitely that enjoyment is coming through for the listeners, and
Yeah. And for players too, I would say for the players that are working on this, I hope that it brings you a lot of just unexpected surprise and just happiness when you're playing it, where you go, oh man, I really like that part that he did there. Ooh, that's a really cool thing that I can work on. Just these little bits and pieces that are buried within each piece. And I hope that comes
I feel
out.
that way. I feel that way when I was working on your piece, and it was just full of fun little surprises, and then some big surprises. And then,
Yeah.
well, you know, my hands are a little bit not shaped for that. So what do I need to do technically to accommodate those big hand stuff? You know, it's like. Yes, and it was just so much fun, and I'm just so grateful that you're willing to join me today and share your process, because I think it's very mysterious for people who don't write music like myself. And I remember telling my friend, and then we're gonna say goodbye after this. One more thought from me is this collection is so rich in different styles, and it reminds me of Poulenc. And not musically, but the idea of the fact that his music is so different from one to the next. I often, when I perform and when I introduce Poulenc to my audience members, I equate him to the musical Picasso, because you have very different styles, very different. It almost seems like different people wrote it in some ways. And this is a collection where it goes from this very sentimental sound to something very cinematic, and to 12 tone rolls.
Yes, yeah. And for what it's worth, the pieces are organized by difficulty too. So like at the very end of the day, you know, we were like, you know what, let's just put it in order of difficulty. That would probably
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously I'm looking at the book now.
The pieces as I wrote them are not in the same order as the final product, because we're just like, let's do it in difficulty level. It'd probably be the best way.
I should have asked that question, because that would have been a fun thing to know.
Oh, it's fine, yeah, because I was like, that's probably the most logical way to break this down, just so that way people want the most difficult pieces go to the end.
It's the teacher in you, right?
Yeah.
Right, so now I don't want to say goodbye, but this is so much fun, but we do have to consider the time, so thank you for joining me. And
Shirley, you are awesome.
time.
This is one of the most easiest and awesome and just like really cool interviews to be able to do. It's just so easy to talk to you about stuff like this. And it's like, you know, it feels really good talking with another musician where I get to share, because nobody's asked me to do this yet. So I was like, oh, cool. I get to talk about my stuff. This is really cool. You know,
this is so awesome for me to be part of the process, to hear what you're talking, to hear what I see on pages, to coming from your words. It's really awesome. So until next time. So for now, we'll say goodbye. And Travis, you're awesome, and thank you for joining me. So until next time.
Thank you again so much, Shirley. You're the best.
Thank you.